morning to all attendees here in North America. Good afternoon to our attendees from Europe. I would like to welcome you to today's webcast focusing on the future of US-Mexico manufacturing and distribution relations. Very excited to have the opportunity to be part of this webinar and co-hosting it with my good colleagues and friends in Mexico, Manuel Aguilar, who's the managing partner of Baker Tilly Mexico, and Eliel Almaya, who's a partner with Baker Tilly Mexico, focusing on taxes, customs, and specifically indirect taxes. Before we dive into the content, I would like to give you guys some housekeeping topics. We are planning on concluding the webinar in within 45 minutes. And if you have any questions, please use the chat function in the GoToMeeting, which you can find on the right side of your screen, and place your questions. And we are going to follow up by email with the answer to your questions. With this being said, let's move into the agenda. What are we planning on covering today? We have just setting the stage. We gathered some facts around trade activities between the USA and Mexico. We're going to introduce briefly the new USMCA and going to look into how it differs to the former agreements. And towards the end, we're going to have a discussion and we'll provide some closing remarks based on experiences we had with our clients during the course of serving them over the last couple of years. Why were we thinking about having this webinar now? First of all, we have the USMCA in place since July, which is a new agreement with new regulations which our clients have to deal with. And then secondly, we received an increased amount of questions in regards to our manufacturing clients who want to revisit their supply chain and ask us to help them with optimizing the supply chain and specifically looking into their activities in the United States and Mexico. With that being said, hand it over to Manuel, who's taking us through the next couple of slides.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks to Cherry Baker for inviting us to participate on this webinar and from have a broad audience from Europe, US, and Mexico. And well, as Joe mentioned, it is relevant to understand why this regionalization is the new name of the game, as we are still suffering the impact of the pandemic, and that impact affected all the supply chains that had a Asian component, talking about North American based businesses that did suffer because of this disruption. So this event clearly showed the weaknesses of this model of offshoring the production or distribution of and supply of certain goods and parts. So this created this situation. So the nearshoring makes a lot of sense now. Nearshoring, using as a term of regionalizing all the supply chain activities of production cycle to a certain area or certain region. And in the past 25 years, back then the NAFTA, now the USMCA, have been playing out a very good role in being very efficient on the supply chain and making business transactions way more smooth and easier, and for sure profitable for the companies that went through the path of producing and sourcing from Mexico and Canada or the US. So That's the name of the game. Now I will be going to the next slide. Well, the impact clearly can be seen on the automotive industry. We have clients in Mexico, including OEMs, that nearly for at least 2.5 months didn't produce any unit, and restarting that was a challenge after pandemic restrictions were eased. But truth be told, as an example, I'm trying to buy a new car since the last 2 months, and I expect to get it delivered by the end of this month. So it is and it is it's a vehicle manufactured in the US that I am purchasing, but it is sourced for parts from all over the world, and that's the reason it's not available right now. So if you can see that the region has been pretty dependent on the free trade, and well, Mexico, it's relevant for the U.S. States economy, that this is the top one in 39 out of the 48 U.S. exporting states, and export from Mexico and Canada equals around $500 billion US per year. That is a lot of money. So there are 3 million jobs related to manufacturing and to exports that represent 27% of the jobs. So trade with Mexico and Canada have benefited not only super large businesses or OEMs, but many North American small and business enterprises, US small and business enterprises, and we're happy to say that Cherry Baker, the Baker Till in Mexico, we do partner with many small and medium-sized businesses to reach their goals on this situation. So it is here, but it's going to grow more, as I think, given the situations we're facing right now. So I think it's a long-term relationship we should be taking care of, and for sure there are plenty of opportunities for businesses and for companies that understand this relationship and want to increase their business share, their market share in the region. So we can move forward. And well, as mentioned, this new name of the game is the USMCA, was signed that was effective, the effective date of 1st of July 2020, and it has a 16 years term. So for sure, the old treaty was 26 years in force. So right now, it seems to us that it is a long-standing relationship, and it's a new version of that. If we can move on. Well, this impact on the business, on the supply chain, is well, will be impacting everything related to logistics and distribution. Remember that the old treaty was agreed upon the mid-90s. The internet era was beginning, but now everything is digitized. All businesses are converging into digital platforms in some way or other, or on the front office or in the back office. Well, there is a stronger push for intellectual property protection, as now the most valuable assets of many businesses are related to intellectual property. So that's something that has to be enforced not only locally but internationally. And well, there is at the same time the international tax treaty, and I'm talking particularly about Mexico, increased, and Mexico is one, I think, the largest has the largest treaty network in Latin America, and Mexico is a big player in terms of international tax treaties. That makes it easier to work in tandem with the trade treaties to make investment possible and to make more efficient to set up a business and have a long-term strategy within the North American region. And well, for sure, the most visible part of the treaty is the reduction or deferral of customs duties or tariffs that impact the competitiveness of a particular business in an area. So that's what, in a nutshell, this USMCA is about. But for sure, in the times to come, there will be new developments, and we will be looking when it is actually enforced, what will be happening with particular industries and situations. So we can move on. I don't know, Eliel, it's your turn.
Yeah, thank you, Manuel. Thank you for all this introduction as well, Joe. And I would like to touch on some specific points on what was the upgrade from NAFTA to USMCA. And I guess there are, like many other treaties, when they are being renegotiated, sectors that didn't have, let's say, the best position at the end. But certainly there is a lot of opportunities. And I will outline some of the industries that were touched by this new treaty, by the USMCA, and a couple of changes that might help to envision what are the opportunities for the near future. One of them is certainly the automotive industry, where the rules of origin were changed, and that lead us to reshape the supply chain. Most of that has to do with the value of content, what that is going to be needed to apply for a USMCA duty deferral. If in a nutshell, what did happen is that the rule of origin was set up in a way that the core parts, the parts that can produce a vehicle, has to be manufactured within a country with a specific wage or salary that has to lead the change from Mexico to maybe United States or maybe Canada to meet that expectation. And by saying that, what I'm saying as well is that some of the parts that were manufactured in Mexico has now to reshape to be manufactured in US, but that's only for the core components. Let's keep in mind that in Mexico, the tier 1 suppliers, tier 2 suppliers are located for more than 2 decades. So it's not necessarily something that they had to worry about, but rather to strip their supply chain and focus on what parts had to be moved to their US facility, and most of them do have a US facility. Well, that's for the automotive industry. Now, for pharmaceutical industry, what we have seen is that most of the changes were related to the protection of the patents or the intellectual property. That is something very good. We can see now that let's say the Brown has leveraged the same level of international regulation. Now, that is something that was missing in Mexico, but now with that specific change, we can see that there's going to be a more investment on that specific area, so they can construct on the protection that they have, plus low cost for many factors, as we'll discuss in some of the following slides. For the chemical industry, this was a very interesting example on how the collaboration between two countries led to specific set of rules that actually protected the investment that were already placed in Mexico, Canada, and the United States. This is some interest exercise on how the industry got together prior to the discussion within the table of USMCA, and they just say, hey, this is the type of rules that we would like to have. This is the set of rules that is applicable for this specific industry, and they actually pulled it off. So it's very, very interesting what happened with the chemicals industry. And that being said, chemical industry is for most of the manufacturing industries the core industry, because most of those raw materials that are used either for pharmaceutical or automotive industry are born in the chemical industry. So that's something very, very important. Most of the high-end technology that was not in place in the area is now being located, because by changing those factors and increasing the protection within the USMCA, they got rid of other competitors that are located in Asia and some of them in Europe. So that's very interesting, how that will develop in the following years. Hand by hand with the intellectual property, Mexico needed to reinforce the digital business, and that did happen. Actually, there is a couple of regulations, local regulations, that were also amended just to meet the expectation of USMCA and also the international trend. We are not discussing necessarily that topic, and that's something that we can certainly discuss in another webinar, but there are actually some implementation of VAT regulations and some income tax regulations as well. There are touching digital business sector in Mexico. The following items, the last three industries, weren't necessarily a big change, but more than reinforcing what was existing. And let's say for the agricultural products, this is actually some big industry, the only industry that has been growing through the pandemic in Mexico in terms of exportation, and that has to do because of the need, as Joe mentioned and Manuel mentioned, of having suppliers at least in the same continent, avoiding the long period of time of transferring the goods from one specific country in Asia to America. Well, I guess there is also a big opportunity in terms of small businesses, because now this treaty has a specific chapter on how to include those small businesses into the supply chain, into the manufacturing process. So they actually did had a committee that is going to be gathering together every 4 to 6 months, more or less, to develop ideas on how to increase the participation in the region of small businesses. So that's mainly the changes at the industry that were touched. But I have another slide for you that will enhance a little further on some of the key changes. Can we change to the next one? Perfect. So one of the most at least discussed rules was precisely the labor that I was referring to for the automotive industry, as well as the change on that specific rule of origin. So what it implies is that the wages, at least for the core parts that are being included in the production of a vehicle, has to be at least $16 US per hour. So that leaves all of Mexico out of that equation for those specific parts. So what we are assuming here is that what will happen is that most of the tier 1 suppliers that deals with these core parts, they are going to be reinforcing their production in either United States or Canada, depending on where they have now the economic factors that will help them to increase their revenue. We can go probably to the next slide. I did touch on these points on the previous one. Good. I guess with that, I turn it over to Joe so he can wrap up this first segment, and we'll continue this.
Yeah. Thanks, Miguel. Thanks, Manuel. Very, very good insights into the current development, the changes, the impact on certain industries, specifically automotive, and the mechanics of the USMCA with some of the production now needs to happen in the United States and Canada to be able to qualify with the, for example, labor rates. So the next section, we're gonna talk about the USMCA as an opportunity driver. Can the USMCA be an advantage for business businesses to operate in the United States and Mexico, and eventually increase their efficiencies by doing so.
Go ahead, Joe. Yes, thanks. Well, because this is such a wide subject, we narrowed this to talk about manufacturing, subsequent distribution related operations, but yes, when a foreign investor, a U.S. investor, thinks about expanding into Mexico, about sourcing from Mexico, there are a lot of things coming out in play, but I think our advice would be to focus on first choosing the right legal and tax structure. This is a different subject from the tariffs and the indirect taxes. The next 3 slides or the next moments will be about the discussion on what will be what are the options that U.S. manufacturer has in order to expand into Mexico. And this has to deal more with the direct taxes, the corporate Mexican income tax, which has changed a little bit in the past years. Probably many of you know about or have heard about the maquiladora or maquila, which seemed to be the only option to come down into Mexico and start a manufacturing operation. That's not the case. There are other options, and maquiladora provides certain advantages, but it is not the only one. So talking about if you see this slide, if you go to the far right, you will be seeing that maquiladora is a type of operation where actually the property of the raw materials and machinery is not exclusive from the Mexican business, but from the U.S. business, or for a U.S. contractor that hires the maquiladora, and the maquiladora's work, or the maquila's work, is to just transform raw materials into a finished or a semi-finished good to be exported back to the US or outside of the region. So it's a common way to structure. There is not as a large investment as other options, but have some restrictions. There is the company has to pay its income tax based on a safe harbor or based on a advanced transfer pricing agreement with the Mexican tax authority, which can take some time to be agreed upon. And well, this safe harbor determines mandatory profitability or taxable income, or 6.5% of top of the overall costs of the operation, or 6.9 on return on all the assets used for that operation. So something that you need to look carefully before deciding to go into. And maquiladoras can only do manufacturing or services or manufacturing activities for export. Maquiladoras cannot distribute, because doing that will be deeming permanent establishment for the U.S. company that contracts that. So if we move to the center, you see the contract manufacturer that can be, in terms of the substance, can do more or less the same activities as a maquiladora, but formally it doesn't need to use the safe harbor limitations for calculating the income tax. So it is way easier to, or more flexible to get this contract manufacturer. As the functions of design, market risk, and other management functions are carried out outside of Mexico, it is justified to leave not such a large profit or a marginal profit in Mexico for income tax purposes. And at the same time, this contract manufacturer is able to sell domestic in Mexico and to distribute as well. So that is a more flexible option than Maquila. And going to the extreme, as you've seen, mostly all the relevant OEMs in the world are now in Mexico. They have full-fledged manufacturing sites there. Although it's relevant to mention that there is a lot of transfer pricing analysis on this, as many parts, many components are sourced from outside of Mexico. So again, that doesn't mean that a full-fledged manufacturer will be constantly reporting high taxable income in Mexico, but they will be depending on how the analysis is arranged and which functions are carried out. So we have these options for manufacturing. If we can go further in the next slide, you will be finding more details on how Maquiladora operated. I probably mentioned it, some of those on my previous comments, but well, at the end of the day, this slide will be helpful for you for reviewing later in terms of how Maquila works in a general sense. So, and if we will move forward again, Joe, we can be finding that the Maquila, as mentioned, has a couple of options for either using the safe harbor scheme, or asking for an advanced pricing agreement. That it is something that our teams at Chair Baker, at Baker Tilly in Mexico, do constantly. We have been lucky to make progress and to get agreements for several of our clients with the Mexican tax authority that, in essence, lower the rate of profitability for tax purposes of the Mexican operation to closer to reality levels, because some of the times there is not enough, because we know automotive and manufacturing in general, it's ultra competitive business. We cannot have a super large profitability in all the processes. So it is important to have a team of specialists that can help you in negotiating these agreements with the authority. So I think we can move forward and to the next chapter. And well, it is important. I didn't want to leave before clarifying that the maquiladora and the full-fledged manufacturer and the contractor are income tax driven, or income tax concepts for corporate income tax. Besides this, there is the EMEX program, or the EMEX, or the export, the programs for exporters that deal with indirect taxes, which Eliel has a more informed opinion on those, and probably will be commented later. So that's something that you should be taking care of, and minding that in Mexico has a value-added tax, which is a very different tax that is not applicable in the US. It's used in Europe or in Canada with a similar structure than in Mexico, but it is important for you to address this before structuring your operations, your new business in Mexico, as there are many pitfalls with the VAT. That's not probably rocket science, or probably not for us, but it's something you need to take care of properly and with the proper guidance. So that's everything from me at this point. Please, Joe, continue with the presentation.
Great, Manuel. I think, I mean, summarizing the last chapter and what we heard, I think it's important that you know, corporations understand that there are different options than only the maquila. So the maquila is like the classic solution which is in place. A lot of my manufacturing clients, especially in the automotive industry, they use that setting. It's a proven setup for many years, but it's certainly worthwhile to spend the time to look into if I want to make a change to my supply chain now, if I want to look into this topic, because I have these external drivers of nearshoring or bringing production back to the continent. It really makes sense to step back and say, okay, I have the maquila and door in place, but maybe there's a different solution which makes more sense for me strategically moving forward with my growth strategy for the organization. And having a holistic approach and working with a team who has done this before and who has the experience and can help with the common pitfalls. You named value-added tax. I had with some of my clients pretty painful experience going through that process by not addressing it initially the way it should have been addressed. So it can be fixed, obviously, but it's a different system. It's not well known in the United States, and it can have some pitfalls. For the next session, we really want to be looking into restructuring. Restructuring has oftentimes a negative connotation. We think it can also be a positive opportunity. It can be really stepping back and taking these external pressures to use it as an accelerator for developments and a positive impact. And we wanted to see how Mexico can be part of that restructuring solution from a more global perspective. Eliel, do you want to go through a couple of these and comment on that?
Certainly. This is more like a summary of what we have been discussing. There are many reasons for restructuring. We just put together the most common ones that our clients are approaching to us with. One of them, certainly to enhance profits. Why not? There is opportunity every time that the world goes on crisis. And if it's a better position to place your supply chain with Mexico, or at least in America, that certainly you need to go deeper and try to analyze that, as we mentioned, first from a holistic approach to make sure that every aspect is being taken into consideration, and then go down deep into the details to find whether there is a good opportunity to enhance your profits. Something that comes in place as well is, what is your financial status? Is that movement will help you to increase your capital, to maybe consolidate debt, or why not maybe try to get another perspective also from a financial standpoint of view. I guess some of that also has to do on how close you want to be to your specific market. In this case, most of the manufacturers are focusing on North America, and that is perhaps the biggest driver, as Manuel is suffering right now to get his car. This is one example of many items that are manufactured abroad and now have to rethink, where do you want to keep your stock, your finished product ready to be delivered to your clients. And I guess there are plenty of items to touch here, but I don't want to be taking the time of everyone on this. I guess Joe or Manuel, do you want to touch on the final comments here?
Well, thanks. Yes, I think it is important to address that yes, this is as Joe has mentioned. It is not. It's easy to say, not easy thing to do. Capital expenditures are big commitments from organizations in moving into a certain direction. This has to be looked at in a holistic way. Long-term strategy of the company and goals to achieve, but I think there are, as it is outlined here, there are many factors that can provide advantages for restructuring, and that's at the end of the day making sense. It will be a broad analysis to be done for every decision to be made. As mentioned, there are opportunities there, but for each opportunity, there are always risks to manage and to contain in order to go ahead. So that's my comment so far.
Yeah, I would echo that. Probably have to consider two major sides. One, the operations which are already active in Mexico, should they extend their activities, should they reorganize their activities in light of the USMCA, and then the companies who are considering moving to Mexico for the first time, what is a good approach? Greenfield, should we think about joint venture activities? Should we go through a transaction, M&A transaction in starting up a business in Mexico? So I think there are great opportunities right now and for the next couple of months, and with the USMCA in place, we should have some plannable framework for these activities, at least if it's focused on United States, Canada, and Mexico. I think we can move on to the last slide. So we have a couple minutes left to discuss. So from an overall perspective, I just wanted to have the opportunity, now that I have you guys here on this webinar, can you share with us some success stories or some common pitfalls? So in my case, I talked about the challenges my clients had with understanding value-added tax and how important it was to have a partner in Mexico who can help navigate that topic. Are there any other things come to mind based on your experience?
Yes, I think as mentioned, I think the common pitfall is not taking care or doing planning regarding VAT, Mexican value-added tax. As an example, a U.S. company has a large agreement with a customer to deliver pieces in Mexico, and all the economic operation analysis is perfect. But when you go through the VAT, it happens that the end customer you will be invoicing from the Mexican operation will be a U.S. company that is not able to get the VAT credit, but because the good is sourced or delivered from Mexico, delivered in Mexico, it creates this exposure. So this is something really relevant that should be addressed in the planning stage of any project like this. Another pitfall is thinking about the labor structure. If there is a Mexican profit sharing with workers that plays out, it's a 10% of taxable income, but that can be managed as well sometimes by creating a services company that do hires for the payroll, and with proper transfer pricing analysis, that a profit sharing can be very well managed. And there are some other issues. I don't know, Eliel, you can share with us some of the experience that you have in the field for more than 20 years, I think, on this.
Yes, indeed. You touched some of the great ones, but there are also some common mistakes that are perceived as hidden costs. By moving your suppliers into Mexico, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are complying with the USMCA rule of origin. So duties are not taken into consideration. By doing that, you are missing a big part of the cost. So that is perceived as a hidden cost. I have a couple of examples on that, but I guess there are also success stories where the driver is precisely to avoid being charged with duties or contraband duties in the United States. So they managed to move what is necessary into Mexico to comply with the USMCA regulation, to comply with the rule of origin, and by doing that, getting the beneficial of the treaty. So I guess there are two ways of looking at this specific part, but I guess that's some of the examples. Joe, back to you. Do you have some of the comments as well?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really important to understand that it requires planning, and it requires spending enough time up front to avoid these pitfalls. It's not an impossible task, or a lot of companies are doing it successful. It's just now you have to kind of step back, look at the USMCA, see how it impacts your organization, make the right changes for your organization, and take into consideration what's your growth trajectory, where do you want to go. Does it make sense now to expand your operation in Mexico? Does it make sense to expand your operations in the United States? What's the market you are serving? Where's the end product going in the end? So I feel like you guys, there are a lot of opportunities right now, and some first mover advantages in the sense of this is a new regulation, and the earlier you can adopt and use it as an advantage for your organization, you will create an advantage for you, and that should create some return on investment.
Yes, I just want to jump in to mention that some of the success stories we know is that US companies moved to Mexico to being more efficient in terms of manufacturing and keeping in mind sourcing the same client base they already have. But when the time comes that they grew in Mexico, they look after the Mexican market, and Mexico is a very attractive market as well, that can buy products that were not previously sourced here. And that makes a lot of sense to create that. There are a lot of consumer goods that started to be just manufactured for US customers are now sold to Mexican ones. And that created a new business line for these companies that made that. So there are opportunities for sure, and well, there is always a way to make this happen with the right help.
I think that these are very good closing remarks, Manuel. So at this point, we are nearing the 45 minutes. So I would like to thank you guys for joining. Also, enjoyed the conversation, and we are going to be staying connected and providing updates to this audience with the further implementation of the USMCA and related developments. Enjoy the rest of your day, and these slides will be provided to the attendees by email, and will also be available on the home pages for download. Same with the recording. Thank you very much, and have a great day.